I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. The moment I saw my daughter-in-law Grace throw that leather suitcase into Meridian Lake, I knew something was terribly wrong. What I found inside that suitcase changed my life forever. But let me start from the beginning. My name is Helen Anderson. I'm 62 years old, and 6 months ago, I buried my only son, Alexander. The house where I raised him now feels too large, too quiet, filled with ghosts of happier times. I've been trying to find a new normal, though I'm not sure what normal means anymore when your child dies before you. It was a sticky October evening, the kind that makes your blouse cling to your back even when you're standing still. I'd just poured myself a cup of chamomile tea and stepped onto the porch of my lakeside home. The sun was setting over Meridian Lake, turning the water into liquid gold. This view had been my comfort through 40 years of life's ups and downs. The sound of tires on gravel broke the evening silence. A silver sedan was racing down the dirt road toward the lake, kicking up clouds of dust behind it. I recognized the car immediately. It belonged to Grace, Alexander's widow. She was driving like someone possessed, much too fast for the narrow, winding dirt road. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I set my teacup down and watched as Grace skidded to a halt near the water's edge. She jumped out of the car like she was spring-loaded, her dark hair wild around her face. Even from my porch, I could see her expression, a mixture of panic and determination that sent a chill down my spine. Grace popped the trunk and pulled out something heavy. A suitcase. Not just any suitcase. The brown leather one Alexander had given her for their 3rd anniversary. "So you can carry your dreams with you," he had told her. I remember because I had helped him pick it out. She struggled with the weight of it. Her body hunched as she dragged it toward the water's edge. The suitcase seemed to be pulling her down, like it contained something far heavier than clothes. "Grace!" I called out, but she either didn't hear me or chose to ignore me. I was too far away, my voice carried away by the evening breeze. I watched in disbelief as she looked around nervously, then swung the suitcase once, twice, and on the 3rd swing, tossed it into the lake. The splash echoed across the water, startling a pair of ducks into flight. The suitcase floated for a moment, then began to sink. Grace stood watching it, her shoulders rigid. Then, as if suddenly aware she might be seen, she spun around and ran back to her car. The engine roared to life, and she sped away, leaving nothing but a cloud of dust and a ripple on the lake's surface where the suitcase had disappeared. For a moment, I couldn't move. My brain struggled to process what I had just witnessed. What would possess Grace to throw a suitcase into the lake? What was she trying to hide? Then I heard it, faint but unmistakable, a sound coming from the lake, from the sinking suitcase. My blood turned to ice. "No," I whispered. "Please, no." I didn't think. I just moved. My aging knees protested as I ran down the porch steps and across the yard toward the lake. Every second felt like an hour. Every breath burned in my lungs. I hadn't run like this in decades, but fear gave me wings. When I reached the shore, the suitcase was barely visible beneath the surface of the water. Without hesitation, I waded in. October in Michigan means cold water, and it took my breath away as it rose past my knees, then my waist. The mud at the bottom sucked at my feet, nearly claiming my right shoe. I stretched out my arms and grabbed one of the suitcase handles. It was heavier than I expected, as if filled with rocks, or something worse. I pulled with all my strength, muscles I hadn't used in years, screaming in protest. And then I heard it again, a muffled sound from inside the suitcase. "Hold on," I gasped, though I don't know who I was talking to. "Please hold on." With a final heave, I dragged the waterlogged suitcase to the shore and fell to my knees beside it. My fingers, clumsy with cold and panic, fumbled with the zipper. It was stuck, rusty or damaged by the water. "Come on," I muttered through clenched teeth. "Come on." With one desperate yank, the zipper gave way. I flung the top open and my world stopped. Wrapped in a soaking light blue blanket was a baby. A newborn, tiny and fragile. His lips were blue, his skin pale as moonlight. He wasn't moving. "Oh, God," I whispered, my hands trembling as I lifted him from the wet confines of the suitcase. "Oh, God, no." He was so cold, so still. His little head fit in the palm of my hand. The umbilical cord had been tied off with common string, not a medical clamp. This baby had been born somewhere secret, somewhere without proper medical care. I pressed my ear to his tiny chest, praying for a sound, any sound. Silence. Then I felt it, the faintest puff of air against my cheek. He was breathing. Barely, but breathing. I clutched him to my chest and ran toward the house, my soaked clothes dripping a trail behind me. The stones of the path cut into my bare feet. I'd lost both shoes in the lake, but I felt no pain. All I felt was the desperate need to save this tiny life. Inside, I grabbed my phone with one hand while holding the baby with the other. My fingers were so cold and shaking so badly that I misdialed twice before connecting with 911. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice was calm, professional. "A baby," I sobbed. "I found a baby in the lake, in a suitcase. He's cold, he's not responding. Please help." "Ma'am, I need you to try to calm down. What's your address?" I rattled off my address, the words tumbling out in a panic. "Help is on the way. Now I need you to place the baby on a flat surface." I swept everything off my kitchen table with one arm, bills, newspapers, my reading glasses, and gently laid the baby down. He looked even smaller under the harsh kitchen light, his skin almost translucent. "Is he breathing?" the dispatcher asked. I leaned close. "Yes, very faintly." "Okay, listen carefully. Get a clean, dry towel. Pat the baby dry very gently, then wrap him up to keep him warm. The ambulance is on the way." I followed her instructions, handling the tiny body with trembling hands. Each small movement seemed to take forever. I wrapped him in a clean towel, then held him against my chest, rocking slightly. "Stay with me, little one," I whispered. "They're coming to help you." Those minutes waiting for the ambulance were the longest of my life. I sat on my kitchen floor, cradling the baby, humming the same lullaby I used to sing to Alexander when he was small. I don't know if I was trying to comfort the baby or myself. When the sirens finally broke the silence, I nearly collapsed with relief. Red and blue lights flashed through my windows as the ambulance pulled into my driveway. 2 paramedics rushed in, a young woman with her dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail and an older man with salt and pepper beard. "Ma'am?" The woman approached me quickly but calmly. Her name tag read Monica Rivera. "I'm going to need to take the baby." I nodded, carefully transferring the bundle to her capable hands. She immediately checked for vital signs, her face professionally blank. "Severe hypothermia, possible water aspiration," she said to her partner. "We need to move, Thomas." Thomas Clark, according to his name tag, nodded and helped prepare a tiny stretcher. They placed an oxygen mask over the baby's face. It covered nearly his entire head, and connected monitors with practiced efficiency. "You're coming with us," Thomas said, glancing at my soaked clothes and bare feet. It wasn't a question. I climbed into the ambulance in a daze. As we sped toward the hospital, Monica continued working on the baby while Thomas asked me questions. "How did you find him?" he asked, his voice gentle but urgent. "In a suitcase. Someone threw it in the lake. I saw it happen." He exchanged a look with Monica. "Did you see who it was?" I hesitated. Grace was Alexander's widow, the mother of this child? It had to be. But how could she do this? Why would she try to drown her own baby? Yes, I finally said. I saw who it was. We reached Lakeside General Hospital in record time. The emergency room doors flew open before we'd fully stopped, and a team in scrubs surrounded the stretcher. They were shouting medical terms as they whisked the baby away through a set of double doors. I tried to follow, but a nurse stopped me with a gentle hand on my arm. "Ma'am, you need to stay here. The doctors are taking good care of him. Let's get you some dry clothes and some information." The nurse, an older woman with kind eyes and laugh lines, led me to a small waiting room. Her name tag read Eleanor Baker. She brought me scrubs to change into and a cup of hot tea that I couldn't bring myself to drink. "I'm going to need you to tell me everything that happened," she said, sitting across from me with a tablet. So I did. I told her about seeing Grace's car, watching her throw the suitcase, hearing the noise, pulling it from the lake. I told her every detail, my voice growing steadier as I spoke. Eleanor took notes without interrupting. When I finished, she looked up with solemn eyes. "The police will want to talk to you. This is attempted murder." The word hung in the air between us. Murder, my daughter-in-law, Alexander's wife, a murderer. "You did the right thing," Eleanor said, patting my hand. "You saved a life today." But I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like I had uncovered something terrible, something I couldn't push back into the darkness. 2 hours passed before a doctor came to speak with me. Dr. James Chen was young, maybe mid-30s, with dark circles under his eyes and hands that smelled of antiseptic soap. "The baby is stable for now," he said, sitting beside me. "He's in the neonatal intensive care unit. He suffered severe hypothermia and aspirated water. His lungs are compromised. The next 48 hours will be critical." "Is he going to live?" My voice cracked on the question. Dr. Chen's expression was honest. "I don't know. We're doing everything we can. He's a fighter, though. Many babies wouldn't have survived this long." The police arrived shortly after. Detective Samantha Wilson was a no-nonsense woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and her hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her partner, Officer Jason Miller, was younger and took notes as Detective Wilson questioned me. "Walk me through what happened, Mrs. Anderson," she said, her voice crisp but not unkind. I repeated my story, trying to be as precise as possible about times, descriptions, everything I could remember. "And you're sure it was Grace Anderson you saw?" Detective Wilson asked, watching me intently. "Yes, it was her car, her dress, the gray one Alexander gave her last year, and I recognized her. I've known her for 5 years." Detective Wilson made a note. "And how close were you to this scene?" "About 100 yards, maybe more. I was on my porch." "In the evening light? At that distance?" I frowned. "I know what I saw, Detective. It was Grace." She exchanged a look with Officer Miller that I couldn't read. "Mrs. Anderson, what is your relationship with your daughter-in-law like?" The real question behind her words was clear. Did I have reason to lie about Grace? "We're not close," I admitted. "We never have been. But I wouldn't make this up. Did you blame her for your son's death?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "What does that have to do with anything?" "Please answer the question, Mrs. Anderson." "The accident." Everyone called Alexander's death an accident. He had been driving home after dinner with Grace. It was raining. The car skidded off the road and hit a tree. Alexander died on impact. Grace walked away with minor scratches. I had always thought it strange, too convenient, but I never said it aloud, never had proof, just a grieving mother's suspicion. "I don't see what Alexander's accident has to do with a baby in a suitcase," I said stiffly. Detective Wilson leaned forward. We're trying to establish a complete picture, Mrs. Anderson. We need to understand all the dynamics at play. I took a deep breath. No, I did not blame Grace for my son's death. It was an accident. The words tasted false on my tongue, but I said them anyway. Have you spoken to Grace recently? 3 weeks ago, on the 6-month anniversary of Alexander's death, she called to check on me. Another exchanged glance between the officers. Mrs. Anderson, we haven't been able to locate Grace. Her house appears empty. Her phone is going straight to voicemail. And right now, you're the only person who claims to have seen her today. Her words fell on me like ice water. They didn't believe me. They thought I had made it all up, or worse, that I had found the baby some other way and was blaming Grace. I didn't lie, I said, my voice shaking with sudden anger. I saw what I saw. Grace threw that suitcase in the lake. Detective Wilson's expression softened slightly. We're not accusing you of anything, Mrs. Anderson. We're just trying to gather all the facts. We need to find Grace as quickly as possible, because if she is that baby's mother, he could be in serious danger. And if she's not, then we have an even bigger mystery on our hands. She handed me her card with her direct number. If you remember anything else, any detail at all, please call me immediately. After they left, I sat in the waiting room, turning Detective Wilson's card over in my hands. Was I losing my mind? Had grief finally broken me? No, I knew what I saw. I was certain it was Grace. But now doubt crept in like poison. What if I had been wrong? What if it was someone else entirely? Around midnight, Father Michael Sullivan from St. Mary's arrived. Someone must have called him. He sat beside me in silence for a long while, his presence solid and comforting. The police think I'm making things up, I finally said. Father Michael nodded thoughtfully. The truth always comes to light, Helen, even if it takes time. That baby doesn't have time, I whispered. Then we pray, he said simply, and took out his rosary. I'm not particularly religious, but I found myself joining him, the familiar words a comfort in the chaos. By morning I was exhausted but refused to leave. Eleanor brought me coffee and a sandwich, standing over me until I ate at least half. The baby made it through the night, she told me with a small smile. His temperature is rising. His lungs are responding to treatment. These are good signs. Can I see him? I asked. Eleanor shook her head. Not yet. Only immediate family at this point. Her expression was apologetic. And we don't even know who his family is. Family. The word sparked something in my tired brain. That baby had to have family. A mother. Grace? But if she had tried to kill him, who was the father? Could it be? No, Alexander had been gone 6 months. But what if? My thoughts were interrupted by Detective Wilson's return. She was alone this time and carried a folder. Her expression was more guarded than before. Mrs. Anderson, I need to ask you a few more questions, she said, sitting across from me. I've told you everything I know. Some inconsistencies have come up that we need to address. The word hung in the air like an accusation. What kind of inconsistencies? Detective Wilson pulled a photograph from her folder and placed it on the small table between us. It was a security camera image of Grace's silver sedan in a parking lot. This photo was taken by a security camera at Riverside Supermarket, about 30 miles from here, yesterday at 5:20 p.m. I stared at the photo. 5:20 p.m. 10 minutes after I saw Grace at the lake. That's impossible. The timestamp and license plate are clear, Mrs. Anderson. I studied the image more closely. It was definitely Grace's car. Same dent on the passenger side door from when she'd backed into a fire hydrant last year. Same vanity plate Alexander had gotten her. I don't understand, I said slowly. I saw her. I was there. How certain are you that it was Grace you saw? The sun would have been setting. You were 100 yards away. Doubt crept in again, unwelcome and persistent. I saw her from behind most of the time. The hair, the dress, the car. I was sure it was her. Detective Wilson leaned forward. Mrs. Anderson, I need you to be completely honest with me. What is your relationship with Grace like? Do you get along? And there it was, the real question she'd been dancing around. Did I hate Grace enough to fabricate a story to hurt her? We're not close, I admitted again. We never have been. Do you blame her for Alexander's death? This time I didn't deflect. Sometimes, I whispered, the admission painful. The accident was convenient. She walked away without a scratch while my son died. I never said anything, never accused her, but yes, I've had my suspicions. Detective Wilson's expression was unreadable. Mrs. Anderson, we haven't been able to find Grace. Her house is empty, not just unoccupied, but cleared out. Closet's empty, personal items gone. Her phone has been disconnected, not just turned off. And you are the only person who claims to have seen her yesterday. Her implication was clear. Either Grace had planned her disappearance meticulously, or I was lying. I didn't make it up, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. I saw what I saw. I heard that baby crying in that suitcase. I pulled him out of the lake. Those are facts, Detective. She nodded slowly. Yes, those parts are definitely true. And that's what makes this so confusing. She stood up. We're going to keep looking for Grace. In the meantime, get some rest, Mrs. Anderson. You've been through a lot. After she left, I sat alone, my thoughts spinning. If Grace wasn't the woman I saw, then who was it? And why would anyone try to drown a newborn baby? Eleanor returned mid-afternoon with surprising news. The doctors need your consent to run some additional tests on the baby, she said. My consent? I'm not family. You're the only responsible adult in the picture right now. Social services is on the way, but in the meantime, the baby needs these tests. We need to know if he has any underlying conditions or if he was exposed to any substances before birth. I signed the papers without hesitation. If there was anything I could do to help this child, I would do it. Rachel Thompson from Child Protective Services arrived an hour later. She was young, probably fresh out of college, with short auburn hair and a professional manner that seemed practiced rather than natural. Mrs. Anderson, she said, sitting next to me, I need to ask you some questions about your situation and your involvement with the baby. Once again, I went through the story. Rachel took notes, occasionally asking for clarification. You live alone? She asked. Yes. Do you have a stable income? I have my late husband's pension and some savings. I'm comfortable. Any history of mental health issues, depression, anxiety? I hesitated. After Alexander died, I took antidepressants for about 3 months. My doctor suggested it. I stopped when I started feeling better. Rachel made a note. The baby will need a temporary home when he's released from the hospital, if he's released. Social services will look for a certified foster family. In the meantime, he'll remain in state custody. State custody. Those words broke something inside me. This tiny baby, who had fought so hard to survive, would be handed over to strangers who would see him as just another case file. What if I wanted to take care of him? The words came out before I could stop them. Rachel looked surprised, then skeptical. Mrs. Anderson, you're 62 years old. You're not a certified foster parent. You have no legal relationship to this child, and you're involved in an active criminal investigation. I saved his life, I protested. I know, she said, her voice softening. And that's incredible. But the system has protocols. The child's best interest comes first. And frankly, your age and recent emotional situation are factors we have to consider. I felt like I'd been slapped. Too old, too unstable, too broken. Maybe she was right. Maybe it was crazy to even think about taking in a newborn at my age. But when I closed my eyes, all I could see was that tiny face, fighting for every breath. And something deep inside told me that no one in the world would love him as fiercely as I already did. That evening, at Eleanor's insistence, I went home to shower and change. "The baby is stable," she assured me. "We'll call you if anything changes." My house felt different when I returned. Colder, emptier than before. The kitchen table still held the evidence of my panic. Scattered papers, my broken reading glasses. Water had pooled on the floor where I had stood dripping from the lake. I cleaned up mechanically, then took a hot shower, letting the water wash away the lake's chill that seemed to have settled in my bones. Afterward, I stood in Alexander's old room, untouched since his death. Trophies from high school football, his college diploma, photos of a life cut short. "Oh, Alex," I whispered to the empty room. "What's happening? Did you know about this baby? Is he yours?" Only silence answered me. I was about to lie down when my phone rang. The hospital. My heart stopped. "Mrs. Anderson?" It was Eleanor. "You need to come back right away." "Is it the baby? Is he—" "He's okay," she said quickly. "But there's been a development. You need to be here." I drove back to the hospital, breaking every speed limit, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Eleanor met me at the entrance, her expression serious, but with something else. Anticipation? "Follow me," she said, leading me through corridors I hadn't seen before. We went to the 3rd floor and ended up in a small conference room. Inside were Detective Wilson, Rachel Thompson, and a distinguished older man in a dark suit I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Anderson," Detective Wilson said, gesturing to a chair. "Please sit down." I sat, my legs suddenly unsteady. Everyone was looking at me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "We received the results of the baby's DNA test," Detective Wilson said. "It was expedited due to the circumstances." "DNA test? I hadn't even known they were doing one." "And?" Detective Wilson exchanged a look with the man in the suit, who nodded slightly. She opened a folder and took out several papers. "The baby is a boy approximately 3 days old according to medical examination," she said, her voice careful and measured. "And Mrs. Anderson, he's your grandson." The world stopped. I heard the words but couldn't process them. "That's impossible," I whispered. "Alexander died 6 months ago." "The results are conclusive," said the man in the suit, speaking for the first time. "I'm Dr. Edward Jenkins, a specialist in forensic genetics. We ran the tests twice to be absolutely certain. The baby shares approximately 25% of his DNA with you, which is consistent with a grandparent-grandchild relationship. He is definitively your biological grandson, the son of your son, Alexander." Son of Alexander, my grandson. A baby Grace had tried to drown. "How?" My voice sounded distant, as if someone else were speaking. "Alexander died 6 months ago. Grace never said anything about a pregnancy." "Exactly," Detective Wilson said, leaning forward. "According to our calculations, she would have been approximately 1 month pregnant at the time of Alexander's death." 1 month pregnant when Alexander died. Grace had known she was carrying his child and had said nothing, had hidden the pregnancy for 9 months, had given birth in secret, had tried to kill her own son, Alexander's son. "I don't understand," I said, tears blurring my vision. "Why would she do something like that? He's her son, Alexander's son." Detective Wilson's expression grew even more serious. "That's what we need to find out. But there's more, Mrs. Anderson, and I need you to listen very carefully." I braced myself, though I couldn't imagine what could be worse than what I'd already learned. "We've been reinvestigating your son's accident. There are inconsistencies, significant ones." "What kind of inconsistencies?" A chill ran down my spine. Alexander's car was examined after the accident. The official report cited a skid due to rain, but we had it checked again. There's evidence of tampering with the brake lines. Someone deliberately cut them. The word landed like a bomb. Tampering. Not an accident. Murder. "Grace," I said. It wasn't a question. "She is our primary suspect," Detective Wilson confirmed. "But we need evidence and we need to find her. As I said, she's disappeared completely. No credit card activity, no phone, no sightings." I stood up, needing to move. I walked to the window, looking out at the city lights below. Normal lives, normal people, while my world was shattering again. "My son," I whispered against the glass. "She killed my son." No one answered. There was nothing to say. Rachel Thompson approached me, her voice gentler than before. "Mrs. Anderson, there's something else you should know. About the baby. About his future." I turned to face her, suddenly alert. "Given that he's your biological grandson, you do have certain legal rights. You can petition for custody." Hope flared in my chest, but Rachel held up a hand. "It will be a complex process. There will be evaluations, home visits, psychological interviews, and in the meantime, the baby will remain in state care." "No." The word came out more forcefully than I intended. "You're not taking him from me. He's all I have left of Alexander. He's my flesh and blood." "I understand," Rachel said. "Truly I do. But the system has protocols." "To hell with your protocols," I snapped. "That baby will be safer with me than with any stranger." "That may be true," Dr. Jenkins interjected. "But there's another factor to consider. The baby suffered severe trauma, hypothermia, near drowning. The next few weeks will be critical for his development. He'll need specialized care, frequent medical follow-ups." "I'll do whatever it takes," I said, my voice steadier now. "Anything." Detective Wilson stood up. "Mrs. Anderson, I need you to understand something. You are not a suspect. We believe your account of events. But you also can't simply take custody of the baby because he's your grandson. There's a legal process. And in the meantime, our priority is finding Grace." "How can I help?" I asked. "Think. Did Grace ever mention any special places, any property, any friends or relatives she might be hiding with?" I closed my eyes, thinking back over all the conversations I'd had with Grace during the 5 years she was married to Alexander. They were few and superficial. She never talked about her past, her family. It was as if she'd appeared from nowhere the day Alexander met her. Then I remembered something. She has an aunt, I think, up north near the Canadian border. Alexander mentioned her once. He said Grace grew up with her after her parents died. Detective Wilson wrote this down quickly. "Name?" "I don't know. Alexander never said." "It's a start," she said. "We'll look into it." After they left, only Eleanor remained with me in the conference room. "Would you like to see your grandson?" she asked softly. Unable to speak, I nodded. She led me through security doors to the neonatal intensive care unit. After having me wash my hands and put on a sterile gown, she brought me to an incubator in the corner. And there he was, my grandson, Alexander's son. So tiny, so fragile, connected to tubes and wires, but alive, fighting. He had Alexander's dark hair, just wisps of it, and his nose. His tiny fingers were like Alexander's too, long and slender. "Can I touch him?" I whispered. Eleanor nodded. Gently through the opening. I reached in and carefully touched his hand. His skin was so soft, so warm now. His little fingers curled reflexively around my index finger, and my heart expanded in my chest. "Hello, little one," I said softly. "I'm your grandma, and I promise I'm going to protect you. No one is ever going to hurt you again." Eleanor put her hand on my shoulder. "He needs a name," she said. "For the hospital records. At least until we find his mother, or until a judge decides." I thought for a moment. Alexander had once told me what he would name his son if he ever had one. It was during a Christmas dinner, after he'd had a little too much wine. "If I ever have a son, Mom, I'll name him Ethan, after Grandpa. Carry on the family name." "Ethan," I said firmly. "His name is Ethan." I stayed by the incubator all night, my finger in Ethan's tiny grasp. I sang him the songs I used to sing to Alexander. I told him about his father, about the kind of man he was. I promised him a future I wasn't sure I could give him, but I promised it anyway. Because now I knew the truth. This baby wasn't a stranger I had rescued by chance. He was my blood, my family, all that remained of my murdered son. And I wasn't going to let anyone take him from me. Not Grace, not the system, not anyone. As the first rays of morning sunlight filtered through the hospital windows, I made a silent vow to Ethan and to Alexander. I would find justice for both of them, no matter what it took. The days following the discovery that Ethan was my grandson became a whirlwind of bureaucracy and emotion. The morning after that revelation, I sat in the hospital cafeteria across from Rachel Thompson, who was explaining the mountain of requirements I would need to fulfill to gain custody of Ethan. Criminal background check, full psychological evaluation, medical exam to ensure you're physically capable, verification of income, home inspection. Rachel read from her tablet in a monotone voice. "You'll also need personal references from at least 3 non-family members and completion of a 40-hour childcare course." I nearly choked on my lukewarm coffee. 40 hours? I raised a son already. I know how to change a diaper. Rachel's expression didn't change. "These are standard requirements, Mrs. Anderson. The fact that Ethan is your biological grandson gives you standing to petition for custody, but it doesn't guarantee approval." "How long will all this take?" I asked, feeling every one of my 62 years weighing on me. "If everything goes smoothly, 6 weeks. Realistically, closer to 3 months. 3 months. Ethan would be in foster care for 3 months while I jumped through bureaucratic hoops to prove I deserved to raise my own grandson. And what happens to Ethan in the meantime? When he's discharged from the hospital, he'll be placed with a certified temporary foster family. You'll be able to visit twice a week under supervision. Twice a week, under supervision, as if I were dangerous to the child whose life I had saved. I bit back the sharp retort forming on my tongue. Fighting with Rachel wouldn't help my case. "I understand," I said instead. "Where do I start?" Rachel handed me a stack of forms. "Fill these out. I'll schedule your psychological evaluation for next week." That night I called Father Michael. I needed references, people who would vouch that I wasn't unstable or incapable. "Of course I'll help," he said when he visited the next day. "You're one of the strongest women I know, Helen. That child is lucky to have you fighting for him." But I didn't feel strong as I looked at the mountain of paperwork spread across my kitchen table. I felt old and tired and scared. How was I going to chase after a toddler in a couple of years? How would I help with homework when he started school? Would I even live long enough to see him graduate? "I'm too old for this," I said aloud, surprising myself with the admission. Father Michael smiled gently. "Moses was 80 when God called him to lead his people. Age is just a number when there's love involved." I wanted to believe him. I really did. The next morning, Eleanor called to tell me Ethan was improving rapidly. "The doctors are amazed," she said. "His lung function is almost normal. If he continues like this, he might be released in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. I looked around my house, seeing it through a social worker's eyes. The house was clean but dated. Alexander's old bedroom would need to be converted into a nursery. I'd need a crib, changing table, baby monitor, all things that cost money I didn't have in abundance. I spent that afternoon at Lakeside General with Eleanor, who patiently taught me how to care for Ethan. She showed me how to support his fragile head, how to change his tiny diapers, how to prepare formula to the exact temperature. "You're doing great," she encouraged as I nervously practiced with a baby doll she'd brought. "It will feel natural once you're doing it with Ethan." But it didn't feel natural. It felt terrifying. One wrong move could hurt him. And yet, when Eleanor arranged for me to hold the real Ethan later that day, just for a few minutes outside the incubator, all fear vanished. He fit perfectly in my arms, like he belonged there. Detective Wilson arrived as I was reluctantly placing Ethan back in his incubator. "Mrs. Anderson," she said, "may I speak with you privately?" In a small consultation room, she shared her findings. "We found Grace's aunt. Meredith Phillips lives in a small town near the Canadian border. We questioned her yesterday." "Did she know where Grace is?" Detective Wilson shook her head. "She hasn't seen Grace in over 2 years. According to her, they had a falling out when Grace borrowed $3,000 and never paid it back." Money. It always seemed to come back to money with Grace. Alexander had earned a good salary as an engineer, around $90,000 a year. He had savings, investments, and a $250,000 life insurance policy with Grace as the beneficiary. "Did Grace collect the insurance?" I asked. 4 months ago, Detective Wilson confirmed. 2 weeks later, she transferred most of it to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. We're trying to track it, but it's complicated. $250,000, the value of my son's life, and she had hidden it away while planning to kill her baby, his baby. "Why?" I asked, the question that had haunted me for days. "Why kill the baby? She could have given him up for adoption, left him at a hospital, anonymously. Why try to drown him?" Detective Wilson was quiet for a long moment. "There's a theory," she finally said. "We've been investigating Alexander's financial affairs. 2 weeks before he died, he changed his will." My heart clenched. Changed it how? He left everything to his future children, not to Grace, to any children they might have. The air left my lungs in a rush. Alexander knew. Somehow he had discovered Grace was pregnant, and he had changed his will to protect his unborn child. "She killed him for money," I whispered, the truth crystallizing with terrible clarity. "We believe so. And then she discovered the money would go to the baby if he was born alive." The sheer evil of it left me speechless. She had killed my son. She had carried his child for 9 months. She had given birth alone. And then she had tried to drown her own baby, Alexander's son, all for money. "Do you have enough to arrest her?" I asked. "When we find her, yes, but she's vanished." I left the hospital that evening with my mind spinning. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed a car slowing as it passed my house, a dark sedan with tinted windows. It continued down the road, but something about it raised the hairs on the back of my neck. Inside, I double-checked that all the doors were locked before sitting down at my kitchen table to review the custody paperwork. The requirements seemed endless. I would need to buy a crib with a government safety certification, install baby gates on all stairs, add cabinet locks, outlet covers, smoke detectors in every room. The estimated cost for all these modifications was over $200, money I didn't have readily available. My late husband's pension and my modest savings kept me comfortable, but not wealthy. I had never expected to be raising a child again at 62. The next day brought the first of many evaluations. Dr. Sarah Johnson, a psychologist assigned by Child Protective Services, interviewed me for 3 grueling hours. "How did you handle your son's death?" she asked, her pen poised over her notepad. "As well as anyone could, I suppose," I answered carefully. "I grieved. I sought help when I needed it. I've tried to move forward." "How do you feel about Grace?" A loaded question if ever there was one. "Before all this? We were cordial but not close. Now? I'm angry. I'm heartbroken. I believe she murdered my son and tried to murder my grandson." "Are you trying to replace Alexander with this baby?" The question stung. "I'm not replacing anyone," I said firmly. "I'm trying to save my grandson. It's different." Dr. Johnson made a note. I couldn't tell if it was good or bad. The home inspection the following day was equally stressful. 2 women from Child Protective Services examined every corner of my house, checking window locks, water temperature, the stability of furniture. They opened closets, peered under sinks, tested smoke detectors. "You'll need to address these issues before we can approve placement," one said, handing me a list of required modifications. I nodded, trying not to show my dismay at the expense. That evening, Eleanor visited with a surprising offer. "I brought some things that might help," she said, carrying a large box into my living room. Inside were baby items, a mobile, bottles, blankets, even clothes. "My daughter's son outgrew these," she explained. "And I have a friend who works at Babyland who can get you a discount on the crib and changing table." I was too moved to speak for a moment. "Thank you," I finally managed. Eleanor smiled. "It takes a village, Helen. You don't have to do this alone." The next morning, Father Michael arrived with 3 men from his church. "We're here to help with the house modifications," he announced. For the next 2 days, they installed safety gates, cabinet locks, outlet covers, and secured furniture to walls. The cost of materials was covered by a special fund from the church for families in need. "I don't know how to thank you," I told Father Michael. "Just give that boy a good home," he replied simply. By the end of the week, Detective Wilson returned with new information. She spread several files on my kitchen table. "We've been digging into Grace's background," she said. "It's concerning." The files revealed a history I never could have imagined. Grace had grown up in foster care after her parents died in what was ruled a house fire when she was 8. She had been in and out of juvenile detention as a teenager, shoplifting, fraud, assault. "She changed her name at 18, Detective Wilson continued. "She was born Angela Davis. We found at least 3 other aliases she's used." I stared at the mug shots of a younger Grace, defiant, cold-eyed. "Alexander never knew any of this?" "We don't think so. She's very good at reinventing herself." Detective Wilson opened another file. We tracked down her aunt, Meredith Phillips, the woman who took her in as a teenager. What did she say? According to Meredith, Grace, or Angela, showed disturbing behavior from an early age. Lying, manipulating, hurting animals. She described her as empty inside. Meredith eventually kicked her out after finding her stealing from her bank account. The picture emerging was chilling. My son had married a sociopath, and none of us had seen it. "There's more," Detective Wilson said. "We examined the financial records more thoroughly. Grace transferred the life insurance money to an offshore account, but she's made 3 large withdrawals in cash over the last month, totaling about $50,000. "She's preparing to run," I said. "Or she already has. But people like Grace make mistakes eventually. They get overconfident." After Detective Wilson left, I went to Alexander's old room, which I'd begun converting into a nursery with Eleanor's help. The football trophies and college pennants were packed away, replaced with a second-hand crib and changing table. The walls, once navy blue, were now a soft yellow. As I was assembling a mobile to hang over the crib, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello? Silence. Then, Betty, a voice I recognized immediately. Grace. My blood ran cold. I fumbled for the recording app on my phone, setting it to capture the call. Where are you? I managed to ask, my voice steadier than I felt. That doesn't matter, she replied. What matters is that I have something you want, and you have something I want. You have nothing I want. I have the truth about what really happened to Alexander, about why I did what I did. I already know the truth, I said. I know you killed him for money. I know you're a monster. A cold laugh. Monster? How dramatic. You don't know anything, Helen. Don't you dare speak ill of my son, I snapped. I'm sure you've already called the police, she said, ignoring my outburst. Go ahead. By the time they trace this call, I'll be long gone. I use burner phones. My mind was racing. I needed to keep her talking to get as much recorded as possible. What do you want, Grace? I want my son. Your son? You tried to drown him. It was a mistake, she said, her voice suddenly softer. A moment of insanity. I had just given birth alone. I was scared, confused. I didn't know what I was doing. But I'm better now. I want my baby back. The audacity took my breath away. Never, I sighed. I'd die first. That can be arranged, she replied with chilling calm. Listen carefully, Helen. I want Ethan, and I want the money from Alexander's will. The trust for the baby. That's another $300,000. $300,000. On top of the life insurance. Everything Alexander had worked for, all meant for his son. And if I refuse? Then I'll come for him anyway. I'm his biological mother. Legally, I have more rights than you. And when they finally catch me, I'll say you stole my baby. That you threatened me. That you made up the whole story about the lake. My word against yours. And I'm much younger, more believable, more sympathetic. I felt sick, but I kept the recording running. How do I know you won't kill us both and take everything anyway? You don't, she said simply. But it's your only choice. Bring the baby and the money to the old warehouse by the lake, the one where you and Alexander used to fish. Tomorrow at midnight. Come alone. If I see any cops, I disappear, and you'll never see me again. But I'll find a way to take Ethan eventually. Grace, wait. But the line was dead. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial Detective Wilson's number. When she answered, I blurted, Grace just called me. I recorded it. She wants Ethan and money. She threatened to kill me. I'm on my way, she said. Don't do anything until I get there. 30 minutes later, Detective Wilson sat at my kitchen table listening to the recording. Her expression darkened with every word. This is exactly what we needed, she said when it finished. Now we can set a trap. You'll go to the meeting. With Ethan? I interrupted, horrified. No, absolutely not. Ethan stays somewhere safe. You'll go alone, pretending you've brought him. We'll have officers hidden throughout the warehouse and surrounding area. When Grace shows up, we'll arrest her. What if she sees the police and runs? She won't see us, Detective Wilson assured me. I'll have snipers, tactical teams in position. She's not getting away this time. The plan took shape over the next day. Eleanor agreed to take Ethan to her sister's house 20 miles away, a location even I wouldn't know the exact address of, for my own protection. Detective Wilson arranged for a special wire for me to wear, one with a panic button. Press this 3 times in quick succession if you feel you're in immediate danger, she explained, demonstrating the small device that would be hidden under my shirt collar. We'll move in right away. We spent hours going over every detail, where I would stand, what I would say, how to keep Grace talking until they had clear confirmation of her identity. The warehouse had been vacant for years, once used for storing fishing equipment, but now just an empty shell of a building. The police had already examined it and placed hidden cameras and microphones throughout. The night of the meeting, I could barely breathe from anxiety. Eleanor had taken Ethan hours earlier. I was wearing a wire, and a team of officers was already in position at the warehouse. All I had to do was show up and keep Grace talking long enough for the police to move in. "Remember," Detective Wilson said as we sat in my car a block away from the warehouse, "you are not alone in there. I'll be listening to every word. At the first sign of real danger, we're coming in." I nodded, my mouth too dry to speak. "It's 11:45, she said, checking her watch. "You should head in. We'll be right behind you." I got out of the car, and Detective Wilson slipped into the shadows. The night was cold and clear, the moon reflecting off the lake beyond the warehouse. My footsteps seemed too loud on the gravel path leading to the main entrance. The door was ajar, just as Detective Wilson had said it would be. I pushed it open, wincing at the creak of rusty hinges. Inside, the warehouse was dark, illuminated only by moonlight filtering through broken windows. "Grace?" I called out, my voice echoing in the empty space. "Close the door," came a voice from the shadows. I did as instructed, squinting to see in the darkness. Slowly, a figure emerged from behind a stack of old crates. Grace looked different, thinner, her once long dark hair now short and bleached blonde. She wore all black, jeans, sweatshirt with the hood pulled back. "You came," she said, sounding almost surprised. "You said you wanted to talk." "I said I wanted my son and the money. Where are they?" I took a deep breath. "The money is in my car. I want answers first." "Answers to what?" "Why, Grace, why did you kill Alexander? Why did you try to kill Ethan?" She laughed, that same cold, empty sound I'd heard on the phone. "Why do you think, Helen? For the money. It was always about the money." "Alexander loved you," I said, my voice breaking. "He gave you everything," Grace scoffed. "Alexander was a romantic fool. He talked about love and family and the future. I wanted freedom. I wanted to travel, to live, not be tied down to a house and a crying baby." "Then why marry him at all?" "Because he was an engineer with a good salary, savings, investments, life insurance. It was an investment. I was going to wait 5 years, divorce him, take half of everything. But then I got pregnant, and it ruined my plan." Each word was like a knife, but I needed her to keep talking. The wire was recording everything. "You told him you didn't want the baby." "Of course I didn't," she said dismissively. "But Alexander became impossible. He changed his will, left everything to the baby. So I had to adapt. If Alexander died while I was pregnant, I'd collect the insurance, but the baby would inherit the rest. The solution was simple. Kill Alexander, have the baby, kill the baby too. Keep everything." She was confessing. To everything. Every word recorded, transmitted. The police were listening. "You hired someone to sabotage the brakes," I prompted. "Victor Martinez. $2,000 up front. A bargain, considering I got $250,000 from the insurance. Best investment I ever made. And Ethan? Your own son?" Grace's expression hardened. "He was an obstacle, nothing more. I gave birth alone in a cabin I rented with cash. No one knew I was pregnant. I wore baggy clothes, avoided people. When he was born, I thought about just leaving him somewhere. But then I remembered the lake. It seemed poetic to end everything at the place Alexander loved so much. I felt rage building inside me, white hot and consuming. But you failed. I saved him." "Yes, that was annoying," she admitted with a casual shrug. "But it doesn't matter because now I'm going to finish the job." "Where is Ethan, Helen?" I stood my ground. "I'm not giving him to you." Her eyes narrowed, and then I saw it. The gun. She pulled it from the pocket of her sweatshirt, small and black, pointing directly at my chest. Last chance. Where is my son? I pressed the panic button. Once, twice, 3 times. You are never going to touch him, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Her finger moved to the trigger. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion. I saw the flash, heard the deafening crack of the gunshot. I felt something hit my left shoulder, hot, burning, knocking me backward. The warehouse exploded with movement and sound. Doors burst open. Blinding lights flooded the space. Shouted commands. Police! Drop the weapon! On the ground now! I saw Grace spin around, saw the guns pointed at her, saw her surrounded with no escape. For a moment I thought she was going to shoot again, force them to kill her, but instead she slowly lowered the gun, let it drop to the floor. She raised her hands. Officers tackled her, pinning her face down, securing handcuffs. She was screaming, curses, threats. But it didn't matter. She was caught. It was over. Detective Wilson ran to me, kneeling beside me as I lay on the cold concrete floor. Helen, stay with me. Paramedics are coming. I'm okay, I managed to say, though the pain in my shoulder was excruciating. You got her. Tell me you got her. We got her, Detective Wilson confirmed. It's over. She's going away for a long, long time. I closed my eyes, relief washing over me despite the pain. Grace was caught. Alexander would have justice. Ethan would be safe. As the paramedics rushed in, I had one last coherent thought before the pain medication took effect. We did it, Alexander. We protected your son. I woke up to the steady beep of a heart monitor and the antiseptic smell of hospital sheets. For a moment I was disoriented, unsure where I was or why my left shoulder felt like it was on fire. Then it all came rushing back. The warehouse, Grace, the gun, the shot. Welcome back, said a familiar voice. I turned my head to see Eleanor sitting beside my bed, and in her arms was Ethan, wrapped in a blue blanket, his eyes open and alert. He's okay? I whispered, my voice rough from the breathing tube they must have removed before I woke. He's perfect, Eleanor assured me. Not a scratch on him. He's been staying with me while you were in surgery. Surgery? The bullet did more damage than they initially thought. It nicked an artery and fractured your collarbone. You've been unconscious for 2 days. 2 days. I tried to sit up, wincing at the pain that shot through my shoulder. Easy, Eleanor cautioned. You're going to be in that bed for a while. Doctor's orders. A nurse appeared, not one I recognized, and checked my vitals. Dr. Chen will be in shortly, she said. He'll want to know you're awake. After she left, I asked the question burning in my mind. Grace? In custody, Eleanor confirmed. No bail. The recording from your wire caught everything. Her confession to Alexander's murder, her attempt to kill Ethan, and of course shooting you. Detective Wilson says it's one of the most airtight cases she's ever seen. Relief washed over me. Grace was caught. She couldn't hurt Ethan now. Can I hold him? I asked, nodding toward my grandson. Eleanor hesitated. Your shoulder, please, just for a moment. She carefully placed Ethan in the crook of my right arm, adjusting the pillows to support us both. The weight of him, solid and warm against my chest, brought tears to my eyes. We did it, I whispered to him. We're safe now. Dr. Chen arrived shortly after, reviewing my charts and examining my wound. You're healing well, he said, but you'll need physical therapy for that shoulder. A few months at least. Will I be able to lift a baby? I asked, the question that mattered most. He considered this. Not immediately, but with proper therapy and time, yes. You'll regain full function eventually. I nodded, trying not to show my concern. How could I care for Ethan if I couldn't even hold him properly? As if reading my thoughts, Eleanor spoke up. I've already told Helen I'll help with Ethan while she recovers. Dr. Chen smiled. That sounds like an excellent arrangement. Later that afternoon, Detective Wilson visited. She looked better than I'd ever seen her. Rested, almost triumphant. How are you feeling? She asked, settling into the chair Eleanor had vacated to take Ethan for a diaper change. Like I've been shot, I replied dryly. But alive. What's happening with Grace? Arraigned this morning. Multiple charges. First-degree murder for Alexander, attempted murder for Ethan, attempted murder for you, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, fraud. The list goes on. The DA is confident there won't be a trial. With the evidence we have, her lawyer will almost certainly advise her to take a plea deal. What kind of deal? Life without the possibility of parole in exchange for taking the death penalty off the table. Life in prison. It seemed both too much and not enough for what she had done. We also found Victor Martinez, Detective Wilson continued. He's cooperating fully in exchange for leniency. He's confirmed everything. Grace paid him $2,000 to tamper with Alexander's brakes. I closed my eyes, the pain in my heart eclipsing the pain in my shoulder. Alexander's death hadn't been an accident. He had been murdered by the woman he loved, carrying his child, all for money. There's more, Detective Wilson said, her voice softer now. We found Grace's computer. There were searches for undetectable poisons dating back to before she was pregnant. This wasn't a spontaneous decision after she found out about the baby. She'd been planning to kill Alexander for a long time. The revelation shouldn't have shocked me after everything else, but it did. The depth of Grace's deception, the coldness of her calculations was staggering. Thank you, I said finally, for believing me, for finding the truth. Detective Wilson nodded. You helped us catch a dangerous woman, Mrs. Anderson. Not many people would have had the courage to face her like you did. After she left, Rachel Thompson arrived, tablet in hand as always. She looked uncomfortable, standing awkwardly at the foot of my bed. I owe you an apology, Mrs. Anderson, she said finally. I should have given more weight to your concerns about Grace. It was as close to an admission of error as I was likely to get from her. What happens now? I asked. With Ethan? Rachel sat down, her professional demeanor returning. Given the circumstances, your petition for custody will be expedited. There will still be evaluations and home visits, but the fact that you literally took a bullet for your grandson counts significantly in your favor. When can he come home with me? You'll need to be released from the hospital first and demonstrate that you can provide adequate care despite your injury. We'll need to see your support system in place. I have Eleanor and Father Michael, the entire St. Mary's congregation. Rachel made a note. That's good. Community support is important. There's also the matter of your physical recovery. You'll need help, at least initially. Whatever it takes, I said firmly. 2 weeks later, I was released from the hospital with a sling, a prescription for pain medication, and strict instructions for physical therapy 3 times a week. Eleanor drove me home, where I found a small crowd waiting on my porch. Father Michael, several church members, and some neighbors I barely knew. What's all this? I asked as Eleanor helped me from the car. Father Michael stepped forward. We thought you might need some help getting settled in. Inside, I found my house transformed. The nursery was complete, crib assembled, changing table stocked, a rocking chair by the window. The kitchen was filled with home-cooked meals in labeled containers. A hospital-style bed had been set up in the downstairs guest room so I wouldn't have to navigate stairs. I don't know what to say, I managed, overwhelmed by their kindness. You don't need to say anything, Father Michael replied. This is what community does. The next day brought a surprise visit from Dr. Edward Jenkins, the forensic geneticist who had confirmed Ethan's relationship to me. "I've been following your case with interest, Mrs. Anderson," he said, accepting the tea Eleanor prepared for us. "Quite remarkable." "Which part?" I asked. "The attempted infanticide or me getting shot?" He smiled slightly. "Your determination. Not everyone would have fought so hard." "He's my grandson," I said simply, as if that explained everything. And to me, it did. "That's actually why I'm here," Dr. Jenkins said, placing his cup down carefully. "I've been asked by the prosecutor's office to testify about the DNA evidence in Grace's trial, should it come to that. But I also wanted to offer my services for another matter." "What matter?" "Establishing Alexander's paternity officially, for legal purposes. It would strengthen your custody case considerably." "But we already know Alexander is Ethan's father." "Yes, but having it documented formally with chain of custody verification and court admissible testing would be beneficial. It would prevent any future challenges." I hadn't considered that there might be challenges in the future, but of course there could be. Grace might have family who would come forward one day. There could be other complications I couldn't foresee. "How do we do this?" I asked. "I'll need a sample from Ethan, just a cheek swab, and something with Alexander's DNA. A toothbrush, hairbrush, anything he used regularly that hasn't been washed." I thought for a moment. "I have his old baseball cap. He wore it all summer before he died. I couldn't bear to get rid of it." Dr. Jenkins nodded. "That should work perfectly." 3 days later, Rachel Thompson conducted the first official home visit. She inspected the nursery, checked the safety modifications, observed as Eleanor helped me change Ethan's diaper with one arm in a sling. "You've made remarkable progress," Rachel acknowledged, making notes on her tablet. "The support system you've established is impressive." "Does that mean Ethan can come home with me?" Rachel hesitated. "There's still the matter of your physical limitations." "Which are temporary," I pointed out. "And I have help." "I can't be here 24/7, Eleanor said, "but I'll be here every day, and we have a rotation of volunteers from the church for nights until Helen's shoulder heals." Rachel looked from Eleanor to me, then to Ethan, who was sleeping peacefully in his portable crib. "I'll recommend a conditional placement," she finally said, "with weekly check-ins and the understanding that you maintain your support network." My heart soared. "When?" "I'll submit my report today, if approved by the end of the week." 4 days later, on a bright November morning, I brought Ethan home. Not for a visit, not under supervision, but home to stay. The moment I carried him through the door, awkwardly, with my good arm and Eleanor hovering nearby, I felt a sense of rightness that had been missing since Alexander died. "Welcome home, little one," I whispered, kissing his forehead. The first few weeks were harder than I'd imagined. My injured shoulder made everything difficult, from changing diapers to preparing bottles. Even with Eleanor's daily help and the rotation of church volunteers, I was exhausted. Ethan woke every 3 hours during the night, and the physical therapy sessions left me drained and sore. But there were moments of pure joy, too. Ethan's first real smile, at just 5 weeks old. The way he studied my face when I fed him, his dark eyes, so like Alexander's, taking in every detail. The perfect weight of him falling asleep on my chest. In those moments, the pain and exhaustion faded away. This was what mattered. This was worth everything. December brought news that Grace had accepted a plea deal, life without the possibility of parole for the murder of Alexander, the attempted murder of Ethan, and the shooting that had nearly killed me. "She'll never see the outside of a prison again," Detective Wilson assured me during a visit. "She can't hurt you or Ethan anymore." I should have felt only relief, but my emotions were more complex. "I want to see her," I said suddenly. Detective Wilson looked shocked. "That's not a good idea." I need to understand. I need to look her in the eye and ask her why. She's a sociopath, Mrs. Anderson. You won't get the answers you're looking for. Perhaps she was right, but the need persisted. A week later, against everyone's advice, I found myself in a prison visiting room, Ethan left safely with Eleanor. I sat at a metal table, my shoulder still in a sling, waiting. When Grace was led in, I almost didn't recognize her. The blonde dye had grown out, showing dark roots. Her face was thinner, harder. The orange jumpsuit hung loosely on her frame, but her eyes were the same, cold, calculating, empty. She sat across from me, handcuffed, a guard standing nearby. "Well, well," she said, a ghost of her old smile playing at her lips. "Mother Anderson, to what do I owe the pleasure?" "I need to know why," I said simply. Grace laughed, a brittle sound in the sterile room. "I already told you why. Money, freedom, isn't that enough? You could have divorced Alexander. You could have given Ethan up for adoption. And get only half? When I could have it all?" She shook her head. "You don't understand people like me, Helen. You never will. Did you ever love him? Even for a moment?" Something flickered across her face. Not remorse exactly, but something almost human. "Alexander was kind, gentle. In another life, maybe." The moment passed and her eyes hardened again. "But kindness is weakness in this world. And Ethan, your own son? A means to an end, nothing more." I studied her face, searching for any hint of the woman my son had loved. There was nothing. "You failed, you know," I said quietly. "Ethan is thriving. He's beautiful and strong. He looks just like Alexander." For the first time, Grace's composure cracked. "Is that why you came? To gloat?" "No, I came to understand. And now I do. You're empty inside. You have nothing. And that's your punishment, to live the rest of your life with nothing, while Ethan and I have everything that matters." I stood to leave, wincing at the pain in my shoulder, a reminder of what this woman had done, what she would have done to Ethan if I hadn't been there. "He'll never know about you," I said as a parting shot. "As far as Ethan will ever be concerned, his mother died in childbirth." Grace lunged forward, stopped short by her handcuffs. "He's mine, my blood." "Blood isn't family," I replied calmly. "Love is family. Goodbye, Grace." I walked out without looking back, a weight lifted from my shoulders despite the physical pain. I would never have to see Grace again. She was exactly where she belonged, locked away, powerless to hurt anyone else. January brought 2 important milestones. My shoulder had healed enough that I no longer needed the sling, and the court date for my permanent custody hearing was set. Ethan was growing rapidly, now almost 3 months old, his personality emerging more each day. He was a serious baby, watching everything with his dark eyes, but his smile, when it came, lit up the room. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. I wore my best suit, freshly pressed, and spent extra time on my hair and makeup. Eleanor had offered to watch Ethan, but I wanted him with me. Wanted the judge to see us together, to see what we meant to each other. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with warm wood paneling and the seal of Michigan above the judge's bench. Judge Margaret Foster was in her 50s, with silver-streaked dark hair and intelligent eyes behind tortoiseshell glasses. She reviewed the files before her with careful attention before looking up at me. "Mrs. Anderson," she began, "yours is an unusual case. I've reviewed all the documentation, the home visits, the psychological evaluations, the references, the medical reports on both you and the child. I've also reviewed the criminal case against Grace Anderson and the DNA confirmation of Ethan's paternity." I held Ethan closer, his warm weight against my chest, both comfort and courage. The state's interest is always the well-being of the child, Judge Foster continued. We must consider what is in Ethan's best interest for his physical, emotional, and developmental needs. She glanced down at her notes. There are factors that would typically raise concerns: your age, your recent injury, the traumatic circumstances of how Ethan came into your care. However, I held my breath. However, there are also extraordinary factors in your favor. Your unwavering commitment to this child, even at risk to your own life. The strong community support you've established. The blood relationship. And the fact that Ethan is thriving in your care, according to all reports. Judge Foster set her papers down and looked me directly in the eyes. Mrs. Anderson, it is the finding of this court that Ethan's best interests will be served by granting you full legal and physical custody. Furthermore, given that his biological mother has forfeited all parental rights through her criminal actions, I am approving your petition to adopt Ethan as your legal son. The words took a moment to penetrate. Full custody, adoption. Ethan would be mine, legally, permanently, completely mine. Thank you, Your Honor, I managed, my voice thick with emotion. Judge Foster's formal demeanor softened slightly. What you've done for that child is remarkable, Mrs. Anderson. Not many would have had your courage or determination. As we left the courtroom, Eleanor and Father Michael were waiting. Eleanor threw her arms around both of us, careful of Ethan. Congratulations, Mama, she whispered, and I laughed through my tears at the title. Father Michael simply squeezed my hand. God's plan, he said softly. Even through darkness, his light finds a way. That evening we had a small celebration at my home. Just Eleanor, Father Michael, Detective Wilson, who insisted we call her Samantha now that the case was closed, and Dr. Chen, who had become something of a friend through Ethan's regular checkups. We toasted with sparkling cider, each of us taking turns holding Ethan, who seemed to enjoy being the center of attention. To new beginnings, Samantha said, raising her glass. And to justice served. To Alexander, I added quietly, who's watching over his son from somewhere. To family, Eleanor concluded, the ones we're born with and the ones we choose. As my guests departed, I took Ethan to the nursery for his final feeding of the night. Sitting in the rocking chair by the window, I watched his little face as he drank his bottle, his eyes growing heavy with sleep. It's just you and me now, officially, I told him softly. But you have a whole village of people who love you. And you had a wonderful father, even if he never got to meet you. Someday I'll tell you all about him, how brave he was, how kind, how much he would have loved you. Ethan's eyes drifted closed, his tiny hand curled around my finger. I continued rocking long after he fell asleep, savoring the moment, the peace, the rightness of it all. Life settled into a new normal over the following months. My shoulder healed completely, though it still ached when rain was coming. Ethan grew at an astonishing rate, hitting every milestone right on schedule, rolling over, sitting up, his first tooth, his first word, Gama, which Eleanor insisted was Grandma. On the anniversary of Alexander's death, I took Ethan to the cemetery. It was a beautiful spring day, the kind Alexander had loved for fishing. I placed flowers on his grave and sat on the bench nearby, Ethan on my lap. He's doing wonderfully, Alex, I said as if my son could hear. Walking already, or trying to. He has your determination, your eyes, your smile. Ethan babbled happily, playing with the buttons on my cardigan. I wish you could see him. I wish... My voice broke. I wish things had been different. But I promise you, I'm giving him the best life I can. He'll know how much you wanted him, how much you loved him even before he was born. He'll know what a hero his father was." As we left the cemetery, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't expected. Alexander was gone, but a part of him lived on in Ethan, and I would make sure that part thrived. Time has a way of healing wounds while simultaneously speeding by at an alarming rate. Before I knew it, Ethan was walking, then running, then starting preschool. My house, once so quiet after Alexander's death, was now filled with the noise and chaos of a growing boy, toy trucks on the floor, finger paintings on the refrigerator, the constant refrain of "Why, Grandma?" that accompanied every explanation. Eleanor remained a constant presence in our lives, a surrogate grandmother who spoiled Ethan shamelessly. Father Michael baptized him at St. Mary's when he was 3, with half the congregation attending. Samantha Wilson visited occasionally, always bringing a small gift and marveling at how much Ethan had grown. I created a memory book for Ethan, filled with photos of Alexander at every age, stories of his childhood, his achievements, his dreams. Someday when Ethan was old enough, I would give it to him. A connection to the father he would never know. The day Ethan turned 5, we had a small party in the backyard. The weather cooperated beautifully, warm sunshine making Meridian Lake shimmer in the distance. Children from Ethan's preschool class ran around playing tag and superhero games, their laughter carrying across the water. I sat on the porch with Eleanor, watching as Ethan blew out the candles on his cake, a chocolate creation shaped like a fire truck, his current obsession. "Penny for your thoughts?" Eleanor asked, sipping her lemonade. "I was thinking about that night," I admitted. "How different everything could have been if I hadn't looked out the window at that exact moment, if I'd been 5 minutes later going to the lake." Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. "Some might call it coincidence. Others, divine intervention. What do you call it?" "The right person being in the right place at the right time. That's you, Helen. You were exactly where you needed to be, when you needed to be there." For Alexander, for Ethan. I watched as Ethan opened his presents with exaggerated excitement, making the other children laugh. He was so full of life, so different from the still, blue-lipped baby I'd pulled from that suitcase 5 years ago. "Do you ever regret it?" Eleanor asked softly. "Taking on a child at your age?" "Not for a single moment," I answered without hesitation. "It hasn't been easy. The sleepless nights, the terrible twos, the endless energy he has that I don't. But regret? Never." After the party, when the guests had gone and Ethan was in bed, exhausted from the excitement, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea. The sun was setting over Meridian Lake, painting the water gold, just as it had been that October evening when everything changed. I looked at the photos from the party on my phone. Ethan grinning with chocolate cake on his face, surrounded by friends, opening presents with delight. Happy, safe, loved. My gaze drifted to a photo on the wall inside, visible through the window. Alexander at his college graduation, young and full of promise. Next to it, a more recent photo. Ethan on his first day of preschool, with the same confident smile, the same dark eyes. "We did it, Alex," I whispered. "Your son is safe. He's happy. He's growing up strong and good, just like you wanted." Though I knew he couldn't answer, I felt a sense of peace wash over me, a feeling that somehow, somewhere, Alexander knew and approved. The following weekend, I took Ethan fishing at the old dock near where Alexander and I used to go. It was his first time, and he was bursting with excitement, clutching his new child-sized fishing rod like a treasure. "Did my daddy like fishing?" he asked as I helped him bait his hook. "He loved it," I told him. "We used to come to this very spot when he was about your age." Ethan's face lit up. And now you're teaching me. And someday I'll teach my kids, right? That's right, I said, smiling at his enthusiasm. That's what family does. Passes things down, generation to generation. We sat side by side on the dock, our lines in the water, the sun warm on our backs. Ethan didn't have the patience for real fishing yet. He checked his line every 30 seconds and talked constantly. But it didn't matter. What mattered was being there together, creating memories, building a foundation for his future. "Grandma?" he said suddenly, his voice serious. "Is my daddy an angel now?" The question caught me off guard. We had talked about Alexander in simple terms, that he had gone to heaven before Ethan was born, that he had loved Ethan very much even though they never met. But Ethan was reaching an age where his questions were becoming more complex. "I believe he is," I said carefully. "I believe he watches over us and protects us." Ethan nodded, satisfied with the answer. "I think he helped you find me." My breath caught. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "In the story you tell me, about how I was lost and you found me. I think Daddy helped you know where to look." Tears pricked my eyes. We had created a gentler version of Ethan's beginnings, a story about how he had been lost and I had found him, how we had both been lonely until we found each other. Someday, when he was much older, I would tell him the full truth. But for now, his innocent interpretation was more perfect than he could know. "You know what?" I said, putting my arm around his small shoulders. "I think you're absolutely right. I think your daddy guided me right to you." Ethan leaned against me, content. After a moment, his line tugged. "Grandma! I got one!" Together we reeled in his first fish, a small sunfish that we carefully unhooked and released back into the lake. Ethan's face shone with pride as the fish swam away. "Can we come again tomorrow?" he asked eagerly. "Anytime you want," I promised. "This is your special place now, too." As we walked back to the house hand in hand, Ethan chattering about his fishing triumph, I felt a sense of completeness I hadn't known was possible after losing Alexander. The circle had been broken, then mended in an unexpected way. Ethan was my second chance, my miracle, my redemption, and I was his safe harbor, his link to the past, his guide to the future. Some might think a woman of my age taking on the raising of a child was foolish, too difficult, too limiting. But they would be wrong. Because love doesn't recognize age or convenience. Love simply is, powerful and transformative, and worth every sacrifice. And when Ethan looks at me with Alexander's eyes, when he laughs with Alexander's laugh, when he shows the same kindness and determination that defined his father, I know without a doubt that this unexpected journey was exactly where I was meant to be all along. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. If you enjoyed this story, check out 2 other channel favorites. My daughter's wedding revealed a 30-year secret, and the last letter from my husband changed everything. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that will touch your heart.